All right, so uh, are you ready for a deep dive
I am.
into the mind of a philosopher who makes even the most hardcore existentialists kind of say, whoa,
Okay.
like, whoa, that's dark. You're talking about
Yeah.
Philipp Mainländer,
Right.
and his philosophy is, well, let's just say,
Yeah.
it's not exactly sunshine and rainbows.
It is not.
That's what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got his major work, Philosophy of Redemption,
Yes.
some biographical information, and even some modern takes
Oh, cool.
on his ideas. So we're going to try to really understand why
Yeah.
this guy's bleak outlook is attracting a following right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mainlander believed that non-existence is preferable to being alive.
Okay.
Not exactly a cheerful thought,
No.
right?
Yeah, no, not really.
But the surprising thing is that he pairs this radical pessimism with a deep sense of empathy.
Hmm.
He actually saw the goal of life as minimizing suffering, which is a pretty thought-provoking idea
Okay.
when you consider his stance on, existence itself.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, that's a tough one.
right.
So we're dealing with a paradox here.
Yeah.
To understand how he got there, let's take a look at his life.
Okay.
This article about him mentions that he was born into a wealthy family in Germany in 1841. But things weren't exactly happy at home.
Yes. His childhood seems to have been pretty rough, thanks to a difficult relationship with his father.
Uh-huh.
Instead of following the well-worn path of the family business, he turned to philosophy, searching for meaning
Okay.
and answers.
Yeah.
And that's where Arthur Schopenhauer enters the picture.
Schopenhauer, the granddaddy of pessimism.
That's right.
Wasn't his big idea that life is dominated by this negative force?
Yes.
He called the will.
Exactly. But Mainländer took that concept and went a step further.
Okay.
Schopenhauer saw the will as this blind force that drives us to keep living and reproducing even though life is full of suffering.
Right.
But Mainländer argued that this will is actually aiming for something else entirely, its own annihilation. It's like the universe itself.
Wants to cease to exist.
That's
We're all just caught up in that process.
heavy stuff.
Yeah.
So how did he develop that into his own philosophy?
He laid it all out in his book Philosophy of Redemption,
Okay.
where he presents these three core tenets that are really unlike anything else in philosophy.
Right.
The first one is what he calls the death of God.
The death of God. That sounds intense.
Yeah.
What exactly did he mean by that?
Mainlander was way ahead of his time with this one. He proposed that the universe began as a single unified entity,
Right.
which he called God, but then this God shattered itself into fragments,
Okay.
and that's how our universe was born.
Wow.
He even has this incredible line, God has died and his death was the life of the world.
I can see why people are drawn to his writing.
Yeah.
He really had a way with words.
Absolutely. And that image of a shattered God leads directly to his second core tenet.
Okay.
The idea that the universe is in a constant state of decay, moving towards nothingness.
Right.
Now, most people would see this as a bad thing,
Yeah.
but Mainlander actually saw it as a positive trajectory.
So he's saying that the universe breaking down isn't a tragedy, but actually a good thing.
That's right.
Why would he think that?
Because for Mainlander, the ultimate goal is to end suffering. He believed that existence itself
Right.
is the source of suffering. So the gradual dissolution of the universe is actually a process of redemption.
Okay.
It's like the universe is slowly unwinding, and as it does, suffering diminishes.
All right. So those first two tenets paint a pretty bleak picture. God is dead. The universe is dissolving.
Right.
But then there's this third tenet that you mentioned, hopeful pessimism.
Yes.
How does that fit in with all this talk of annihilation and decay?
This is where the paradox of Mainlander really shines through. Even though he believed that nothingness was the ultimate goal, he still saw a purpose in our existence
Okay.
to alleviate suffering while we're here. He believed that by working to reduce suffering,
Right.
we're participating in this cosmic process of redemption.
It's like he's saying, sure, the universe is doomed,
Yeah.
but let's at least try to make things a little less miserable along the way.
Exactly. It's a very different kind of hope.
Okay.
Not focused on some blissful future utopia,
Right.
but on minimizing harm in the present.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the reality of suffering,
Right.
but choosing to act compassionately anyway. And it's this idea,
Uh-huh.
this hopeful pessimism, that I think resonates so much with people today,
Yeah.
especially in a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because in a way, Mainlander is kind of turning the whole idea of hope on its head.
Right.
We usually think of hope as this positive force that drives us towards something better.
Yeah.
But in Mainlander's philosophy, hope is almost about acceptance,
Yeah.
about acknowledging the darkness and choosing to act compassionately in spite of it.
I think that's a great point. It's not about denying the reality of suffering or pretending that everything will magically work out in the end.
Right.
It's about confronting the harsh truths of existence
Yeah.
and saying, okay, this is the situation. How can I make things a little bit better?
And there's something kind of freeing about that, isn't there?
Yeah.
If we let go of the need for everything to be perfect,
You're right.
for there to be some grand cosmic plan, maybe we can focus more on the things we could actually control,
Yeah.
like our own actions and how we treat others.
Absolutely. And this is where Mainlander's personal life gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because as you can imagine, this philosophy led to some contradictions.
Oh, I bet. Didn't he actually end his own life?
You're right.
That doesn't seem very in line with minimizing suffering.
Mainlander committed suicide at the age of 34, shortly after finishing Philosophy of Redemption.
Wow.
It's a tragic irony, and it's something that many scholars have grappled with.
So how do we reconcile this act with his philosophical beliefs?
Right.
Was he just being hypocritical?
It's more complicated than that. Remember, Mainlander believed that non-existence was the ultimate goal, the ultimate liberation from suffering. It's possible that he saw his own suicide as a way of achieving that liberation,
Okay.
both for himself and, in a sense, for the universe as a whole.
I guess that makes sense in a way, although it's still a difficult thing to kind of wrap your head around.
Yeah.
And this article mentions that his life was full of contradictions.
Yeah.
Even beyond his suicide, for instance, even though he was deeply pessimistic.
Yeah.
He also advocated for progressive political ideals like social justice and equality.
Exactly. He wasn't content to simply wallow in despair.
Right.
He genuinely wanted to alleviate suffering in the world, and he saw political activism as a way to do that.
So even though he believed that the universe was fundamentally flawed
Yes.
and on this one-way trip to oblivion,
Yes.
he still saw value in trying to make things better for humanity.
Yes, and that's one of the most intriguing aspects of Mainlander's philosophy. He didn't see his pessimism as an excuse for apathy or inaction. In fact, it seems to have fueled his desire to make a positive impact on the world. It's like he was saying, look, we may be doomed in the long run,
Right.
but let's at least try to create a more just and compassionate society while we're here.
That's a pretty powerful message.
Yeah.
Even if it comes from a place of profound pessimism,
Right.
it kind of flips the script on how we usually think about motivation.
Right.
Usually we need hope to fuel our actions,
Yeah.
but Mainlander suggests that maybe accepting the futility of it all can actually inspire us to work harder for a better world.
It's a radical idea, but one that's worth considering. And what's fascinating is that Mainlander's philosophy was largely ignored for decades after his death.
Really?
He was seen as too bleak, too radical, too out of step with the mainstream.
But that's changing now, isn't it?
It is.
You mentioned that he's starting to gain a following. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there are a few reasons. First, I think his ideas resonate with a lot of people who are struggling with the anxieties of modern life. We're constantly bombarded with messages of positivity and self-improvement.
Right.
But for many, that just feels inauthentic or out of touch with the realities of the world.
So Mainlander's pessimism is almost like a breath of fresh air
Yeah.
in a world that's obsessed with being happy and positive all the time.
Exactly. He gives us permission to acknowledge the darkness, to acknowledge the suffering that's inherent in existence,
Right.
without trying to sugarcoat it. And within that acceptance, there's a strange kind of comfort, a feeling of solidarity
Right.
with someone who's willing to face the bleak truths that many of us try to ignore.
Yeah. It's like he's saying, hey, it's okay to not be okay.
Right.
And that's something a lot of people are craving these days.
Yeah.
A little honesty about the struggles of life.
Absolutely. And that honesty can be incredibly powerful,
Yes.
especially when it comes from a place of intellectual rigor
Right.
and philosophical depth. Mainlander doesn't just offer empty platitudes or easy solutions. He forces us to grapple with the big questions, the uncomfortable truths that we often try to avoid.
And one of those big questions has been nagging at me
Okay.
this whole time.
Yeah.
If we buy into this idea
Right.
that the universe is ultimately heading toward non-existence,
Right.
does that mean everything we do is meaningless?
Yeah.
Should we all just give up, eat cake for every meal,
Oh, right.
and wait for the cosmic curtain to fall?
That's the challenge Mainlander throws at us.
Okay.
He doesn't give us a simple answer. Instead, he asks us to reconsider what meaning even means
Right.
in a universe that's destined for oblivion.
So how do we find meaning when the ultimate goal is nothingness?
Right.
What does progress even look like in that context?
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because Mainlander's perspective almost flips the script.
Yeah.
On our traditional ideas about progress, we usually think of progress as striving for something bigger, better, more complex. But if the end goal is non-existence, the ultimate progress might actually lie in simplification, in reducing suffering, in letting go of our attachments to the material world.
It's almost like a cosmic version of minimalism, right?
Exactly.
Stripping away the unnecessary, focusing on what truly matters.
Exactly. And what truly matters, according to Mainlander,
Right.
is minimizing suffering.
Okay.
So maybe progress in a Mainlanderian sense
What?
is about creating a world where there's less pain,
Right.
less inequality, less striving for things that ultimately don't matter.
It's a pretty radical way to think about progress.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly compelling, especially when you consider the state of the world today.
Right.
Maybe instead of constantly trying to grow and expand,
Yeah.
we should be focusing on creating a more just and equitable society.
Yeah.
One where everyone has the opportunity to live a life free from unnecessary suffering.
And that brings us back to Mainlander's idea of hopeful pessimism.
Right.
Even though he believed that the universe was fundamentally flawed, he still believed in the power of human action. So to make a difference, he saw meaning in alleviating suffering,
Right.
even if that suffering was ultimately inevitable.
So Mainlander's philosophy is not a call to apathy or despair,
Right.
but rather a call to action,
Yes.
a call to make the most of our limited time here
Yeah.
by focusing on what truly matters: compassion,
Yeah.
empathy, and the pursuit of a more just world.
Precisely. It's about finding meaning in the face of meaninglessness, about choosing to act with compassion,
Yeah.
even when we know that everything will eventually wade away.
This has been a truly mind-bending deep dive.
Yeah, it has.
Mainlander's philosophy is definitely challenging,
Yeah,
but it's also incredibly thought-provoking.
it is.
He forces us to confront the big questions about life, death, and the meaning of it all
Right.
in a way that few other philosophers have.
And perhaps that's the greatest gift. He offers us the gift of questioning, of challenging our assumptions, of looking at the world from a completely different perspective.
So to our listener out there wrestling with the ideas of Philipp Mainländer,
Yeah.
I think the takeaway here is to kind of let his philosophy resonate with you in your own way.
I agree.
Maybe it inspires you to take action, to work towards a better world. Maybe it gives you a new perspective on death and the nature of existence.
Right.
Or maybe it just makes you appreciate the present moment a little bit more, knowing that everything is ultimately fleeting.
That's a good point.
So thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Philipp Mainländer.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.